I bet people don't even know this. You can react to proteins in wheat that are not gluten.
Okay, so it's other things in the wheat.
Just think like a plant is going to have multiple different proteins in it. And the other thing is that you might not react directly to one thing, but when your body breaks it down, you react to one of the breakdown products of that protein. So I look at a panel that looks at all those things because sometimes it can be missed. Your wheat issue might not just be a gluten issue. It could be a wheat protein issue that has nothing to do with gluten. These are the types of things we have to look at. You know, maybe the poop pills did reverse the gluten sensitivity, but I would be curious, you know, because we're an over glutenized society because our wheat has been hybridized and changed, and it has 30 to 50% more gluten than it ever did in the last 50 years. And what that means is that you're being exposed to way more gluten than your gut can handle. It's a very difficult protein to break down. Our enzyme can't handle gluten that well.
And is that just kind of in the US? Is that the same thing in the food system in Europe and South America and other countries?
Actually, it depends on what's being exported. The US does export to Cuba.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there is an exception to the embargo.
Which is?
Wheat.
Really?
If you look at the ancient wheat, like the einkorn wheat, they're not as high in gluten. And I've had patients come from India where they're eating products that are made from wheat over there, and they come to the US and suddenly they start reacting to wheat and gluten, and they never had a reaction before. And vice versa. I've had patients go to foreign countries and they eat things over there and say, well, I didn't react. It's so strange. The wheat is different. It's not the same.
True.
When you go to Europe, they have much stricter policies about what can be sprayed with pesticides or not. A lot of wheat in the US, not organic, is being sprayed with glyphosate as a way to mature the wheat and desiccate it so that it's available for harvest all at the same time. And that means that our wheat is contaminated with glyphosate. And I can tell you because I just ran an environmental toxins panel on a patient of mine who's a pilot. And when he's at home, he's like you. He's intermittent fasting. He's eating organic. He's married, like wife cooks, healthy as can be. You would think this guy's glyphosate level in the blood should be undetectable. Like it shouldn't be existent. But it was on the high end.
How?
I started asking him, well, what are you eating when you're traveling, when you're out? And he's like, yeah, well, sometimes I'm a little more lax. I might have sandwich or a slice of pizza. That was enough. The exposures during travel were enough to cause him to have a high glyphosate, which also speaks to how contaminated our food is if you're not eating the right foods.
So I'm going to take a wild guess and say there's not a lot of gluten in your house or wheat in your house specifically.
Not at all. And actually, back in 2007, I did a blood test because I'm also kind of a data person and I needed something to prove to me because it felt like this is 2007. Gluten-free was not in mode back then. You know, it was still the early days for it. It wasn't the easiest thing to do when you went to eat out. And I had a blood test with that was an IgG4 with complement activation. So there's different ways to test for food sensitivities. So apparently when you do IgG4 and then you do the complement activation, it's the next step that is kind of confirming that this is really causing a reaction in your body.
Okay.
And I had that reaction to gluten, and that was the impetus to take it out of my diet. Every time I tested it, I would break out in a rash on the inside of my wrist that I never had when I was eating gluten, funny enough. And that happens a lot where you're eating a food so much that your body is almost like confused. It's inflaming you, but your body's not giving you a specific read. And then when you take it out and you test it again, your body's going to go like that. It's going to tell you immediately.
Okay. Yeah, I did that with chocolate recently, the blood spot. So I did the blood spot. The first one I did was a mediator release test where they took a vial of blood, sent me all the results. That said, okay, gluten and soy, you're off the charts for. There's some other yellows, but those are the reds. And then I did the blot test probably a year later. One of the things I'm high on is cacao. And I'm like, cacao? No, I like chocolate. Why chocolate? Don't do this to me, chocolate. I've never had an issue. And I noticed some of the rashes had been coming back, which is why I wanted to test it. And so I cut it out and everything went away. And sure enough, I waited like 60 days. I'm like, I'm going to go ham on chocolate today. I'm going to eat a bunch of chocolate. So I eat all this dark chocolate, no sugar, super clean stuff. And sure enough, a few hours later, I start breaking out and I'm like, no. It's funny that like your body can be that reactive, especially when you take it out of your system for a while.
When I reintroduced gluten, I was out to brunch and I used to love rye bread. I ordered some rye bread and I was like, okay, I've been good for 3 months. Let me test it out, 3 months. Like, let's see if I can have a little bit. Within 10 minutes, 10 minutes is not long enough for that bread to have even fully digested in my stomach. And yet within 10 minutes, I was breaking out in a rash, my wrist. Now because now there's pattern recognition, which is really important for anybody who's listening. Sometimes you wonder like, well, I did this. Did it really affect me? You want to be clean. And then if you really aren't sure about the pattern, you do it again and you look for the pattern, and you've got to be really paying attention.
What I'm really wondering is, how do you get back to the point where you can eat rye bread again and I can eat chocolate again and we're not going to have issues?
It's a
How do we
good
make that
question.
happen?
Maybe we need to try those poop pills.
I know. I mean, maybe we need to start eating some poop pills here. Now, let's we can kind of get into some fun on fact or fiction in a minute. But one of the ones I want to touch on is like white rice versus brown rice. I thought for a long time the healthy version was brown. So I was that guy at the sushi restaurant that's ordering brown rice.